Whispers below of winds of airbows howled across the barren white landscape, carrying ice crystals that stung like microscopic daggers against exposed skin. Nikolai Voss adjusted his thermal mask and squinted through the specialized goggles that protected his eyes from both the blinding whiteness and the planet's harsh ultraviolet radiation. "Base, this is Voss at Quadrant 7, he reported into his comm unit. "Thermal readings are stable, but subsurface anomalies persist, requesting permission to deploy deep-skin probes." The response came with a 3-second delay, the time it took for signals to bounce between his position and the research station 50 kilometers away. "Permission granted, Voss. Quantum dynamics wants those readings by the end of the cycle." "Don't disappoint," Nikolai grimaced. 15 years studying planetary climatology, 3 advanced degrees, and here he was, taking orders from corporate bureaucrats who had never set foot on the ice. Still, he knew his position was privileged. Not many got to work on frontier worlds, especially ones with terraforming potential like airbows. He deployed the probe, watching as it melted through the surface ice with its thermal drill. The device transmitted data to his wrist computer in real-time temperature gradients, mineral compositions, the usual metrics. Nikolai was about to pack up when a strange reading caught his attention. "That can't be right," he muttered, tapping the display. The probe had detected minute electrical impulses at a depth of 87 meters, rhythmic, almost like neural activity. He ran the scan again. Same results. That night in his private quarters, Nikolai reviewed the data obsessively. Airbows was supposed to be lifeless, that's why quantum dynamics had chosen it for their experimental climate manipulation project, a clean slate. Yet these readings suggested otherwise. He couldn't sleep. The patterns reminded him of something he'd seen years ago, during his postdoctoral work on Earth brainwave patterns of deep hibernation in Arctic mammals. But stronger, more complex. The next day, despite protocol requiring him to report such findings immediately, Nikolai said nothing during the morning briefing. Director Harada would simply classify the data and assign another team. This was his discovery. "You're looking tired, Voss," remarked Tanner, one of the technicians, as Nikolai loaded equipment onto his rover. "Late night analyzing samples," he replied vaguely, heading back to Quadrant 7 for follow-up readings. Tanner shrugged. "Better you than me. That sector gives me the creeps. Something about the ice formations there." Nikolai knew what he meant. The glacial structures in Quadrant 7 were different, more crystalline, almost architectural. Some of the junior scientists joked about alien builders, but Nikolai had always dismissed such talk. Until now. At the site, he deployed a more sophisticated probe, one designed for exobiological sampling. As it descended, his comm unit crackled with static. Strange, the system was designed to function in Erebos's magnetic field. The static intensified as the probe reached 80 meters depth. Then, through the white noise, he heard a sound so faint he might have imagined it. A voice, or something like a voice, whispering in a language he couldn't comprehend. The probe's camera activated automatically when it breached into a small air pocket. The images it sent back made Nikolai's breath catch. The ice below wasn't solid, but honeycombed with tiny, perfectly hexagonal chambers. And in each chamber, something glowed with a soft, pulsing blue light. As night fell and the temperature plummeted to -70, Nikolai made his decision. He would return to base, gather supplies for an extended expedition, and come back. Whatever was 87 meters below the surface of Airbows was calling to him, and he had to answer. That night, for the first time since arriving on this frozen world, he dreamed, a dream of warmth, of blue light, and of a figure suspended in crystal, waiting to be found. The crystalline chamber. Nikolai requisitioned equipment with careful precision: thermal drills, portable heating units, bioscanners, and enough supplies for a 3-day geological survey. If Director Harada suspected anything unusual, she didn't show it, merely signing off on his request with a distracted nod. "Try not to freeze to death out there, Voss," she said, her eyes already returning to her screens. The paperwork would be a nightmare. 2 days later, Nikolai had established a small outpost at Quadrant 7. The rover's environmental systems strained against the bitter cold as night fell. the temperature display steadily dropping until it settled at -76°C. Outside, aurora-like phenomena danced across the sky, casting eerie green reflections on the ice. Sleep evaded him as the whispers from below seemed to intensify. Not audible, exactly, but a presence at the edge of perception, like feeling watch while alone in a room. By morning, dark circles shadowed his eyes, but determination drove him forward. "This is crazy," he muttered to himself as he activated the thermal drill, completely outside protocol. But he couldn't stop. The electrical impulses had increased overnight, growing stronger and more rhythmic, almost as if whatever lay beneath knew he was there. The drill worked methodically, carving a spiral tunnel through the ice wide enough for Nikolai to descend. Heat exchangers kept the tunnel from refreezing as he worked, and by midday, he had reached 30 meters. His wrist computer beeped a message from base. He ignored it. They'd wait another day before sending someone to check on him. By then, he'd know what waited below. At 60 meters, the ice changed. No longer the opaque white of compressed snow, it became increasingly translucent, shot through with veins of something that sparkled with an internal light. The drill struggled against this new material, its blade wearing down faster than expected. At 80 meters, the drill broke through suddenly, and Nikolai nearly lost his balance as it plunged into empty space. He quickly stabilized the equipment and peered down through the opening. A chamber opened below, vast and silent. The light of his headlamp reflected off crystalline surfaces, fracturing into thousands of rainbow prisms. He lowered a probe with a camera, watching its feed as it descended. The chamber was roughly circular, perhaps 30 meters in diameter, its walls formed of the same strange, luminescent crystal that had begun appearing in the ice above. The floor was perfectly smooth, as if polished by artificial means. And in the center, "My God," Nikolai whispered. A column of translucent blue crystal rose from the floor to the ceiling. Within it, suspended as if floating in water, was a humanoid figure, small, perhaps 160 centimeters tall, with slender limbs and features that seemed almost but not quite human. The skin visible through the crystal had a faint lavender hue, and hair like spun silver floated around the delicate face. Most striking were the markings, intricate patterns that covered the visible portions of the being's body, glowing with a pulsing light that matched exactly the electrical impulses his equipment had detected. Nikolai made his decision. He secured the repelling equipment and began his descent into the chamber, his heart pounding with a mixture of scientific excitement and something else, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. Wonder. The air in the chamber was unexpectedly warm and carried a faint scent like cinnamon and ozone. As his boots touched the floor, the entire chamber seemed to respond, the crystalline walls pulsing once with light, before settling back to their previous glow. Approaching the central column, Nikolai placed his gloved hand against its surface. It felt warm, almost alive beneath his touch. The figure within remained motionless, yet he could swear the patterns on its skin pulsed more rapidly at his proximity. His scanner confirmed what seemed impossible. The being was alive, in some form of suspended animation, perhaps, but definitely alive. According to the readings, she had been here for approximately 1,100 Earth years. "Who are you?" he whispered, not expecting an answer. "What happened to you?" As if in response, a single tendril of light emerged from the crystal, reaching toward him like a curious finger. When it touched his forehead, Nikolai gasped as images flooded his mind, a civilization of beings like the one before him. A cataclysmic, stellar event, a desperate plan for survival. Then darkness as the connection broke, leaving him breathless and trembling on his knees. His wrist computer beeped again, more urgently this time. A message scrolled across the screen. "Unauthorized. Drilling detected in restricted zone. Return to base immediately for disciplinary action." Nikolai looked up at the suspended figure, its expression peaceful in its crystal prison. He couldn't leave her here to be exploited by quantum dynamics. Whatever she was, whoever she was, she deserved better than to become a corporate specimen. "I'm going to help you," he promised, reaching for his equipment. "I don't know how yet, but I'm going to get you out." The chamber pulsed once more with light, as if in acknowledgement of his words. Above, the storm winds of airbows howled across the surface, But here in the crystalline chamber, Nikolai felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time since his wife's death 3 years ago, he had found something worth risking everything for. Thawing Heart's crystalline material resisted conventional tools. For 3 days, Nikolai worked in shifts, carefully studying the alien matrix before attempting to breach it. Each time his equipment touched the luminescent surface, images flickered through his mind, fragments of memory that weren't his own. A thriving civilization, a dying star, a desperate race to preserve what could be saved. On the 4th day, Director Harada's voice crackled through his comm unit. "Voss, this insubordination ends now. A security team is en route to your position. Whatever you've found belongs to quantum dynamics." Nikolai crushed the communicator under his boot. There would be no going back after this. He turned to the suspended figure, whose pulsing patterns had grown stronger with each passing day. "I need to get you out before they arrive," he said, speaking aloud though he wasn't sure she could hear him. "But I don't know how without hurting you." As if in response, the crystal column emitted a soft hum. The patterns on the being's skin brightened, and Nikolai felt a gentle pressure in his mind, not invasive, but inviting. Hesitantly, he removed his glove and placed his bare palm against the warm surface. The connection was immediate and overwhelming. Not just images this time, but emotions, concepts, language flooding into him with such intensity that he staggered backward, gasping for breath. When his vision cleared, he understood. Her name, or at least the closest approximation his human mind could process, was Inera. She was the last preserver of the Vashtari, a race who had inhabited Erebos millennia before humans discovered it. The crystal wasn't a prison, but a conscious stasis medium, a living technology that had kept her suspended between life and death. As the planet's climate shifted toward the deadly ice age, humans had discovered, most importantly, he now knew how to release her. Working quickly, Nikolai positioned his remaining equipment around the crystal column. The release required a precise sequence of sonic frequencies and thermal pulses, technology far beyond human development. Yet somehow he understood it perfectly from the knowledge Inera had shared. As the final sequence activated, the crystal began to dissolve, not melting, but seeming to transform into particles of light that floated upward before fading. Inera's small form slowly descended, and Nikolai stepped forward to catch her before she could touch the cold floor. She weighed almost nothing in his arms, her skin cool but rapidly warming. The glowing patterns across her body dimmed slightly as her eyelids fluttered. When they opened, Nikolai found himself staring into irises of deep violet, with pupils that contracted vertically like a cat's. Inera's lips moved, forming words in a language no human had ever heard. But Nikolai understood. "You came," she whispered, her mental voice soft in his mind. "After so long, someone finally came." "I'm here," he replied, surprised to find his voice thick with emotion. "You're safe now." Her slender fingers touched his face, exploring the contours with gentle curiosity. "Your mind is different, your form is different, but your spirit—" She paused, searching for words. "Your spirit resonates with mine." Nikolai wrapped her in thermal blankets, his scientific training automatically assessing her condition well. Something deeper, something he thought had died with his wife, responded to the connection between them. "We need to leave," he explained, helping her to stand on unsteady legs. "Others are coming who might not understand what you are, who might want to use you." Inera nodded, her silver hair shifting like liquid around her shoulders. "I have seen such minds before, even among my own people. There were those who sought power through knowledge rather than wisdom." She took a faltering step, then another, her body remembering movement after centuries of stillness. The markings on her skin pulsed in time with her heartbeat, visible through the thin garment that covered her, a material Nikolai couldn't identify. Neither fabric nor metal, but something in between. "Can you climb?" he asked, gesturing toward the tunnel he'd created. Inera looked up, then back at him with a small smile that transformed her alien features into something unexpectedly beautiful. "We need not climb." She raised her hands, and the crystalline walls of the chamber responded, restructuring themselves before Nikolai's astonished eyes. A spiral staircase formed, winding upward toward the surface. "The ice remembers," she explained. Seeing his expression, it was part of us once, part of our world, before the great cold came. As they ascended the crystal staircase, Nikolai explained his world, the human colonization efforts, quantum dynamics terraforming plans, and what it would mean for Erebos, for her home. Inara listened silently, her expressions shifting between sorrow and curiosity. When they reached the surface, she paused, gazing at the transformed landscape of her planet with ancient eyes. So much lost, she murmured, yet perhaps not everything. In the distance, the lights of approaching vehicles cut through the permanent twilight of Erebos winter. The security team was coming. Nikolai took Inara's hand, surprised at how natural the gesture felt. We need to go. My rover has supplies, and I know places they won't think to look for us. She turned to him, her violet eyes reflecting the aurora above. You risk much for one you do not know. I know enough, he replied, the certainty in his voice surprising even himself. As they hurried toward his rover, Inara stumbling occasionally on her newly awakened limbs, Nikolai realized something had changed within him. The ice that had formed around his heart since Julia's death had begun to thaw, just as surely as the alien woman beside him had thawed from her crystal sleep. Behind them, the entrance to the chamber collapsed in on itself, leaving no trace of what lay beneath. Ancient knowledge of the rover crawled through a labyrinth of ice canyons, its navigation system disabled to prevent tracking. Nikolai relied on instinct and the old-fashioned paper maps he'd made during previous expeditions, places where the planet's magnetic anomalies would shield them from quantum dynamics sensors. In the passenger seat, Inara sat with her knees drawn to her chest, violet eyes wide, as she absorbed everything. The rover's heating system struggled against Erebos' brutal cold, but she seemed unbothered by the temperature. You are in pain, she said suddenly, her voice still carrying that musical quality that didn't quite match human speech patterns. Nikolai glanced at her, surprised. I'm fine, not physical pain. Her slender fingers reached out, hesitating just above his temple. May I? He nodded, unsure what to expect. Her touch was feather-light, but the connection that formed between them felt profound, not invasive like before, gentler, more controlled. You lost someone, she said softly. Someone who was your heart. The image of Julia floated between them, her laugh, the way she'd tuck her hair behind her ear when concentrating, her final days in the hospital when the treatments stopped working. My wife, Nikolai confirmed, his voice rough. 3 years ago. Cancer, a disease our medicine still can't always cure. Inara withdrew her hand, but the warmth of the connection lingered. Among my people, we believe that those we love never truly leave us. Their patterns remain, echoing in the spaces between stars. Is that what your people believed, or what you know? Nikolai asked, steering the rover into a narrow pass between towering ice formations. A smile touched her lips, perhaps both. The Vashdari understood that consciousness is not confined to flesh. When the great cold came, we knew our bodies would perish, but hoped our essence might endure. How many of you were there? Once, millions. By the end, only the Preservation Council remained, 12 of us, chosen to carry our collective memory. Her expression darkened. I do not know if the others survived. Our chambers were scattered across the planet to increase the chance that at least one would endure. The implications hit Nikolai like a physical blow. There could be 11 more preservation chambers out there, perhaps, though after so much time. She trailed off, gazing out at the endless white landscape. They reached Nikolai's destination, near midnight, a cave system he'd discovered months earlier, but never reported. Thermal vents deep within kept the interior relatively warm, creating a microclimate where strange, phosphorescent fungi grew on the rock walls. After securing the rover, they ventured deeper into the caves. Inara moved with increasing confidence, her body remembering its strength. The markings on her skin glowed brighter in the darkness, illuminating their path. These caves were sacred to us, she said, trailing her fingers along the wall. The heat from below reminded us that Erebos was not always cold. What happened to your world? Nikolai asked, setting up their small camp near one of the thermal vents. Inara sat cross-legged on a thermal blanket, her silver hair reflecting the blue glow of her skin markings. Our sun began to fade, not dying as stars eventually do, but Changing, the stellar radiation shifted, and our atmosphere could no longer protect us. The cold came quickly after that. She closed her eyes, and suddenly the cave around them seemed to shift. Nikolai gasped as projections formed in the air, three-dimensional images of airbows. As it once was, verdant plains stretched beneath twin moons, crystalline cities rose from the landscape, and beings like Inera moved through the scenes. We were a peaceful people, she continued, the images changing to show laboratories, observatories, gardens of plants unlike anything on Earth. We studied the cosmos, created art, cultivated harmony with our world. When we realized what was happening to our sun, we tried to save everyone. The projections darkened, showing frantic activity, massive construction projects, and finally, the preservation chambers being sealed as ice claimed the land. We thought it would be temporary, a few generations at most. We never imagined. Her voice broke. Without thinking, Nikolai moved to sit beside her, taking her small hand in his. The projections faded, leaving only the natural glow of the fungi and her skin markings. On the last, she whispered, "Aren't I?" He couldn't lie to her. "I don't know, but if there are others, I promise we'll try to find them." She turned to him, studying his face with ancient eyes. "Why would you help me? Your people came to change this world, not preserve its past. Not all humans think alike," he said. "Some of us believe in learning from what came before, not erasing it." A noise from his abandoned communicator interrupted them. Static, then a voice, Director Harada, sounding uncharacteristically urgent. "To all personnel, subject is to be captured intact. Repeat, the alien specimen is of highest priority. The indigenous technology could revolutionize our understanding of suspended animation. All units authorized to use necessary force to secure VOS, but the specimen must not be harmed." Inera's expression remained calm, but Nikolai felt a ripple of emotion through their lingering mental connection, not fear, but a profound sadness. "Your people will hunt us," she said simply. "Not my people, a corporation." Nikolai switched off the communicator. "There's a difference, is there?" Her question held no judgment, only genuine curiosity. Instead of answering, Nikolai opened his tablet and showed her the topographical maps of airbows. "If there are more preservation chambers out there, would you recognize the likely locations?" Inera studied the maps, her fingers tracing patterns across the screen that left trails of light. "Here," she said, marking several points. "These were sacred sites, places of power where the crystal grew naturally." As she worked, Nikolai watched her, the grace of her movements, the intensity of her concentration. Something was growing between them that defied rational explanation. Not just fascination or scientific curiosity, but a connection that transcended their different species and histories. "Inera," he said softly, "I need to ask you something. The terraforming process, quantum dynamics plans would eventually warm this planet, melt the ice. Would that help your people if they're still out there, or would it destroy evidence of your civilization?" She looked up, her violet eyes meeting his. "Both, perhaps, but the question contains an assumption that your way is the only path forward. The Vashtari knew how to live in harmony with worlds, not reshape them to our will. Perhaps there's a third option, where both our peoples could thrive." Her hand found his again, and the connection between them deepened. In that moment, surrounded by the glowing fungi of an alien cave system, Nikolai realized he had already made his choice. Whatever came next, he would stand with her, not just to protect her, but because in her ancient wisdom, he had found something he thought lost forever. Hope. Breaking surface dawn broke over airbows, painting the ice fields in shades of crimson and gold. Nikolai checked the rover's modified scanner one last time. They had perhaps 3 hours before quantum dynamics satellites would sweep this sector. "Again, it's time," he said, turning to Inera. She stood at the cave entrance, her silver hair pulled back and secured with a clip from Nikolai's sparse belongings. The past week had transformed her, strength returning to her limbs, confidence to her movements. She'd adapted to his clothing, though they hung loosely on her slender frame. The glowing markings on her skin had dimmed to near invisibility, a conscious effort on her part to appear less alien. "You're certain about this course?" she asked. her voice carrying that musical lilt that still sent a shiver down his spine. Nikolai nodded. The abandoned research station at the northern pole is our best chance. It has a long-range communication array I can modify to contact people. I trust scientists independent of corporate control. What he didn't say was how slim their chances were. Quantum Dynamics had deployed nearly all its security forces in the search for them. The corporation's messages, which they'd intercepted sporadically, revealed an almost fanatical interest in the specimen and its hibernation technology. They loaded the rover with supplies and the makeshift equipment Nikolai had assembled from spare parts. Most important was the data crystal Inera had created, containing the accumulated knowledge of her civilization, a gift she intended for humanity, though Nikolai had doubts about whether his species deserved it. As they prepared to leave the safety of the caves, Inera placed her hand on his arm. "There is something I must show you first." She led him deeper into the cave system, to a chamber they hadn't explored. At its center stood a column of crystal similar to the one that had preserved her, but smaller and partially damaged. "Another preservation chamber?" Nikolai asked, excitement rising. Inera shook her head. "A seed vault, the essence of Erebos, as it once was." She approached the crystal, placing both palms against its surface. The patterns on her skin flared to life, and the crystal responded, illuminating from within. Inside, Nikolai could see thousands of tiny objects suspended in the matrix: seeds, spores, embryonic forms of creatures long extinct. "If your people simply terraform this world, it will become a copy of Earth," she said. "But with these Erebos, could be reborn as itself, the world that was meant to be here." The implications were staggering. Not just a new approach to planetary development, but a complete paradigm shift in how humanity might coexist with alien environments. "We'll need to take it with us," Nikolai said. Inera smiled. "It is already coming." Before his eyes, the crystal shrank, compressing itself until it was no larger than his fist. She took the glowing object and placed it in his hands. "The future of my world. I entrust it to you." The weight of her trust humbled him. Without thinking, he leaned forward and pressed his forehead to hers, a gesture he'd seen her make when deeply moved. The connection between them flared, and for a moment, he felt everything she felt: her sorrow for her lost people, her wonder at finding him, and something deeper, warmer, that mirrored his own growing feelings. They parted reluctantly, both aware of the dangers waiting outside. The journey to the northern station was treacherous. Twice they had to abandon the rover and proceed on foot to avoid detection. The cold was merciless, and even with thermal gear, Nikolai felt it seeping into his bones. Only Inera seemed unaffected. Her Vashtari physiology adapted to survive. Far worse. At one point, as they crouched behind an ice formation while a corporate shuttle passed overhead, she asked the question he'd been avoiding: "If we succeed, what then?" Her violet eyes searched his face. "Your life is elsewhere. Your people would not accept me." "Some would," he replied, thinking of colleagues who had left corporate science for independent research. "And honestly, I'm not sure I have a life to return to. Not one that matters." She touched his face gently. "You still grieve for her." "I always will," he admitted. "But that doesn't mean there isn't room for something new. Someone new." The moment was interrupted by the shuttle circling back. They pressed deeper into their hiding place, breath held, until the danger passed. The abandoned station appeared on the horizon as twilight fell, a collection of domed structures, half buried in snow, dark and seemingly lifeless. But Nikolai knew better. Emergency power systems would still function, and the communication array, while outdated, could be modified for their purposes. What he didn't expect was the Quantum Dynamics security team already waiting there. They spotted the vehicles too late to retreat, for armed guards and a familiar figure, Dr. Westfield, the corporation's head of xenobiology. The ambush was swift and efficient. Within moments, they were surrounded, Nikolai forced to his knees in the snow, while Inera stood motionless, her expression unreadable. "Remarkable specimen," Westfield said, circling Inera with clinical interest. "Humanoid, yet clearly not human. The bioluminescent patterns suggest a complex neural network unlike anything in our records." He turned to Nikolai. "You've put us through quite a lot of trouble, Voss. She's not a specimen, Nikolai spat. She's the last survivor of an advanced civilization that was here long before us. Westfield smiled thinly. All the more reason for careful study. The hibernation technology alone could be worth trillions. Imagine human colonists in suspended animation during interstellar journeys, awakening unchanged centuries later. You don't understand, Nikolai argued, struggling against the guard who held him. She's offering us something better, a way to coexist with alien environments, instead of destroying them. A partnership instead of exploitation. Noble sentiments, Westfield replied. But quantum dynamics isn't in the partnership business. We're in the profit business. He gestured to his guards. Secure the specimen for transport. Use non-lethal methods. As a guard approached with restraints, Inera finally moved. Her hand touched the ice beneath her feet, and the patterns on her skin flared to brilliant life. This world remembers, she said, her voice carrying a power Nikolai hadn't heard before. It remembers what it was and what it could be again. The ice beneath them trembled. Cracks spread outward from where she stood, and a low rumbling filled the air. The guards hesitated, looking to Westfield for guidance. What's happening? The scientist demanded, his composure slipping. Nikolai smiled grimly. She's waking up the planet. The ground heaved violently. From the fracturing ice, crystalline structures began to emerge, not random formations, but clearly designed, architectural. The abandoned station shuddered as crystal growths enveloped its foundations, not destroying but transforming. The seed vault, Nikolai realized. You've activated it. Inera nodded, her eyes glowing as brightly as the patterns on her skin. Not just seeds for plants, but for our living architecture. The memory of Erebos was never truly lost, only sleeping. Westfield stumbled backward as the ice beneath his feet turned to luminescent crystal. The guards dropped their weapons, faces pale with fear as the transformation spread. Within minutes, they had fled to their vehicles, abandoning their mission. In the face of something they couldn't comprehend, only Westfield remained, his scientific curiosity momentarily overcoming his fear. What is this? He whispered. The beginning, Inera answered. Go back to your people. Tell them Erebos is not dead or empty. Tell them the Vashtari have returned, and we are willing to share our world but never to surrender it. The scientist backed away, then turned and ran for the last remaining vehicle. As it disappeared into the gathering darkness, Nikolai turned to Inera in wonder. Will it spread? The reawakening, she nodded. Slowly at first, then faster. The crystal remembers the patterns of life. In time, it will transform the ice fields back to what they once were, not erasing the cold, but creating balance round them. The transformed station hummed with power as ancient systems reconnected with the emerging crystal. Network lights flickered on in structures that had been dark for decades. The communication array. Nikolai said suddenly, will it still work? Better than before, Inera replied, leading him inside the main dome, now a breathtaking fusion of human technology and Vashtari crystal. Your message will reach farther than you imagined. In the days that followed, Nikolai sent his call to the scientific community, not just data about Inera and her people, but a vision for a new kind of planetary development. The response was overwhelming. Independent researchers, environmental advocates, even dissidents within quantum dynamics itself rallied to their cause. 3 months later, as the first expedition of allied scientists approached Erebos, Nikolai stood with Inera at the edge of what had once been a barren ice field. Now, crystal spires rose toward the sky, and in protected valleys, the first green shoots of ancient Vashtari plants pushed through the warming soil. Do you think they'll understand? He asked, watching the approaching shuttle. Inera's hand found his, their fingers intertwining. The connection between them had deepened into something neither had words for, a bond that transcended their different origins. Some will, she replied, enough to make a difference. She turned to face him, her violet eyes reflecting the double sunset. When you first found me, you were also frozen, not in crystal, but in grief. Now we have both broken through the surface. Nikolai drew her close, no longer surprised by how perfectly she fit against him despite their differences. To new beginnings, he said softly. Above them, the stars of an alien sky began to appear. witnessing the rebirth of a world once thought lost, and the unlikely love that had made it possible. As the shuttle landed and the first wide-eyed scientists emerged, Nikolai and Inera stepped forward together, representatives of two civilizations finding a third path forward, one that honored both their pasts while creating something entirely new. The ice had broken, and beneath it, life waited to flourish once more.